officers and fellow councillors, and a fellow councillor who's online, Councillor Buckley, and those of you who are in the audience. So welcome to East Gippsland Shire's council meeting of Tuesday, the 18th of March 2025. East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public by following the link on Council's website. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. So no other person has the right to record Council meetings unless approval has been granted by the Chair. In line with the Local Government Act, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and the meetings will be open to the public via live streaming. If technical difficulties are experienced with the live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If technical issues can't be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later time or date. So at item 1.1 is recognition of traditional custodians. So East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai Kurnai, the Monero and the Bidawal people as the traditional owners of this land that encompasses East Gippsland Shire, and their enduring relationship with country. The traditional owners have cared and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in Gippsland, their elders past, present and future. So we have Councillor Buckley, who was hoping to be here in person but is appearing online. So if I ask you, Councillor Buckley, as a member's attendance can only be recorded as present at a council meeting when the member can confirm that they meet all of the following criteria. They can hear proceedings and can be heard by other members in attendance, and they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members. So I will now confirm with each councillor attending online, the one councillor attending online, in turn that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and to note assurance from each from you that you are in a location that is secure to ensure confidential deliberations remain confidential. So, Councillor Buckley, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
And can you confirm that the location you are participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Indeed it is. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Now, I may ask the CEO, are there any apologies for tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. We have no apologies this evening.
Thank you. At 1.3 is, are there any declarations of a conflict of interest at tonight's meeting? So, Councillor Eastman, you have a conflict. Could you please lead us to the item number, please?
In relation to 5.1.2, the amended development plan for Brookfield Lakes Estate.
Thank you very much. That's noted. And Sarah, Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict of item 5.1.3.
Thank you. Duly noted. Thank you. So, councillors, we'll now move on to the confirmation of the minutes from our last meeting. So, do I have a mover to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday, the 18th of February 2025? Thank you, Councillor Davis. And a seconder, please. Ladies first. Councillor Ashworth, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
No, Mayor, no.
Thank you. And for the second, a definite no? Good. Is the motion opposed? So, in following formalities, I'll ask, does anyone else wish to speak for or against? Okay, thank you. So, I'll put the motion to the vote. So, all those for. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, our next council meeting is scheduled to be held on Tuesday the 15th of April 2025 at the Corporate Centre here at 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 p.m. So I will ask our CEO, Ms Weigel, are there any requests for leave of absence?
I don't believe I have any for the next meeting, Mayor, no.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Now, I'll just interrupt the normal proceedings for the meeting with something that's really sad, and that is that we lost an incredibly valuable member of our community last week, that being Debbie Gray. So I would like to read a few words. So it is my sad duty to acknowledge the passing of Deb Gray earlier this month. Deb managed to overcome tremendous challenges that confronted her from birth and was a long-standing member of Council's Disability Advisory Committee. Deb most recently served as the judge for our Youth Art Prize in late 2024 and was a passionate advocate for people with disabilities, always working with determination to improve the lives of others in our community. In January this year, Deb shared her personal journey through her autobiography, A Simple Twist of Fate. It's a recommended read, which was launched in Lakes Entrance, a testament to her resilience and remarkable story. So on behalf of East Gippsland Shire Council, we extend our deepest condolences to Deb's family. She was admired by so many people and will be sadly missed. Thank you. So at 1.7, moving on, we have our open forum. So can I please ask the CEO, do we have any petitions?
Thank you, Mayor. We don't have a petition tabled tonight. However, we did receive a petition from residents in seeking a upgrade to a footpath in the Bairnsdale area and around McRae Street. The petition itself didn't meet the requirements to formally table it to the councillors through the meeting. However, it will be distributed to the councillors, and we have most certainly taken on board what the petition was requesting, and have indicated back to the head petitioner that whilst we are formally addressing it through a council meeting, we understand the need or the desire for a footpath, and have confirmed that it is on our list of priorities, perhaps not as high on the list as they would like it, but it is there and it is acknowledged that there is a need there. So not a formal petition tonight, Mayor, but I thought it was worth mentioning that.
I do concur, and I also applaud the work that was done to produce all the names on this petition that's not a petition through technicalities, but certainly we do acknowledge all that work, and we're here to support the people who are on that petition, and also at some stage that their request will be done by the council as we work through budgets and affordability, but definitely you are on the list, so just like to say that. Now, Ms Weigel, questions of council.
Thank you,
I
Mayor.
shouldn't be asking this, but are there any questions? But I already know the answer.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have a number of questions of council this evening. We have 4 questioners, and some have 2 questions that they've asked to be read out. Morris Borgelt, who is with us, is our last questioner, but I've got some, Morris, that I'll read out before we ask you to come up to the table. The others are not here in person and have asked that their questions be read. The first is from...
Just to interrupt, please, I probably should read the passage about asking questions, so as everybody's across that before you read the first one. So just to be clear, members of the public addressing council are reminded to extend due courtesy and respect to the council, its staff and the process under which it operates, and shall take direction from the chair whenever called upon to do so. There will be no discussion or debate with the attendee for public questions or submissions. However, councillors may ask questions of clarification of the attendee. as Chair, I reserve the right to cease a question or submission at any point if it is deemed inappropriate or inconsistent with Council's governance rules or mutual respect charter. There are 4 public questions for tonight, 3 of which have asked Ms Weigel to read the questions on their behalf. These questions are for Ms Jessica Crane, Mr Peter Jones and Mr John Butler Cole. And as the CEO has pointed out, Mr Morris Orgelt is here in person to ask his question. So could you please read the questions, Ms
Thank you.
Weigel?
I will read them in the order in which we've received them. So the first 2 questions were from Ms Jessica Crane. Question 1 is, we own the property directly neighbouring this property, which is 160 Orrs Road, Wyong, and have objected to the removal of the Section 173 agreement. The application for the removal states that the neighbours agreed to the removal. This is clearly incorrect. As a neighbouring objector to the removal, what precedent would this set for the removal of other Section 173 agreements, if allowed? I will ask our General Manager of Place and Communities to respond to that first question, and then I'll read the second.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mayor. The report that we have on tonight's agenda and attached assessment outline the matters that the officers have considered in relation to the agreement, the reasons for the agreement and the possible outcome if the agreement was ended. While any future application to end an agreement must be considered on its merits, the officers have suggested further strategic work be undertaken with additional public consultation before supporting removal of any agreement on an ad hoc basis.
Thank you. And the second question is to do with the same matter. We purchased our property from the original owner with this agreement being a selling point. It gives us privacy, and at the time of purchase we also paid a premium for this. If this Section 173 agreement was removed, how would anyone have any faith in the validity of a Section 173 agreement that they are not just going to be removed at a later date? And again, Mr Stevenson, sorry.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, and once again through you, Mayor. The Planning and Environment Act 1987 requires consideration of the reasons why an agreement was established and whether the reasons have changed. For this application, the reasons for the agreement, we believe the reasons for the agreement have not changed. Also, the reasons to remove the agreement are not based on any change in provisions or policy of the planning scheme. It is considered that the agreement should remain in place until some form of significant change has been made to the planning scheme. For this change to happen, there would need to be strategic justification and landowner consultation.
Thank you. Our second set of questions are from Mr Peter Jones on behalf of the East Gippsland Ratepayers and Residents Association. And I'll just ask Ms Johnson to come up to the table. In considering of the budget process, EGRRA, the Ratepayers Association, understands the CEO has a delegation which has substantially increased in recent years. Please advise the EGRRA of the occasions where this delegation has been used and its total value in the previous council term, that's 2020 to 2024, and where is this expenditure identified and recorded? Thank you, Ms Johnson.
Thank you, CEO, and through you, Mayor. So to give a little bit of context to everyone on this one, the Local Government Act obviously defines what powers can be delegated across council and gives the right for council to delegate some things to the CEO. This is contained, well, that power is contained in Section 11, subsection 2 of the Local Government Act. So council currently gives a financial delegation amount of $500,000 to the CEO. That hasn't changed since June 2020, so that was the last time that was reviewed. Now, a copy of the instrument of delegation is publicly available on council's website, and from a utilisation of that delegation, there's a few different ways you can find that information. So you can look at our annual report, you can look at our quarterly performance report, which is being presented tonight as well against the budget spend. And you can also look at the section on procurement under delegation as well on our website too.
Thank you. And I'll ask you to stay there so we get the second question, the preamble of which is considering the current economic climate and the wish to minimise cost to ratepayers of East Gippsland, EGRRA is concerned at the apparent number, justification and cost of consultancies. Please advise EGRRA of the number of occasions where consultants were engaged with justification for engagement and the total cost of each project in the last term of council, being from 2020 to 2024. Thank you, Ms Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, CEO, and again through you, Mayor. So there's quite a bit of analytics involved in crunching that question down to the lowest level, so I will just answer it in more of a high-level summary, if that's okay. Obviously, our commitment to our community is to provide the most efficient services possible with ratepayers' money, and we remain committed to that. You can see in last year's budget that we built in $1.3 million in efficiency targets, and that we've got more efficiency targets to come as part of our future budgets as well. If I look at the consultancy spend, and so obviously there's a spend that you'll see in the budget and the annual report, and then you'll also see that we get, there's numerous amounts of grants, because we really heavily invest in getting grants to be able to pay for these things, which means that the community directly here isn't paying for them. When I scan that out across the last 4 years, I've got about an average of between $800 and $1.6 million spent across each year. For the last 4 years. So if I then put that, an overlay of that and analyse it across our percentage of total operational spend, we're talking 1% or under of our total operational spend on consultancies across the last 4 years of the council term. I hope that provides some context for the question.
Thank you. The next set of questions are from Mr John Butler Cole on behalf of the East Gippsland Ratepayers and Residents Association. The question 1, has Council been briefed yet on the full data received from the recent community survey, priority survey, and what are the results?
Thank you, CEO, and again through you, Mayor. So yes, Council has been briefed on that, and I'd like to again thank community for providing feedback into that survey. It is the first time that we've done that survey in this particular way, and we're really pleased with the results. We will be releasing information on some of the key themes that the community highlighted to us as part of that survey through lots of different public communication forms, including our newsletter and media releases and so forth. We'll also be presenting a report back to the council group publicly at the next council meeting on the 15th of April for those who want to listen in. And I suppose the next step for councillors is to confirm their approach to how they're going to address the themes through the council plan, which is obviously something that they'll be looking to approve before June this year, and the budget process. So that was what the key input for that particular piece of work was for. So thanks for the question, and thanks again to the community for feeding into that one.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Mayor, they were the last of the questions that I was to read, but we do have 2 questions from Mr Morris Borgelt, who is in the gallery, and I'd ask him to come forward and ask his questions directly. And I'd ask Ms Johnson to stay so she can respond to those questions.
So welcome, Mr Borgelt. And just to remind you that there is a time limit on the questions, so 5 minutes. Hopefully you've able to ask your question or questions.
Surely you get to read these questions?
Yes, of course you do.
Well, they can't take more than 5 minutes.
We might just get Mr Borgelt to turn on his microphone so that people watching from home
No,
can...
you're on now. Sorry, Mr Borgelt, you're on.
Okay. Whether this is number 1 or number 2, I don't know. Next Lakes Carnival EO date is what I'm looking for. The last time the EO for the Lakes Entrance Carnival occurred was approximately 18 months preceding the implementation date for the carnival. It's approximately 20 months to the next non-licensed Christmas carnival. What is Council's anticipated date for the 2026 Lakes Entrance Carnival EOI?
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr Boggo, for the question. So planning has commenced. So obviously this is a 2026 EOI process. So early planning has commenced for that, and we would be expecting to be releasing an EOI either much later in 2025 or early 2026 in regards to that particular carnival public land space.
Okay.
If you give me at least 1 year, you're going to release it in.
So again, it would be because...
You don't know, in other words.
So we've commenced planning for it, and it would be later, which would be in the last quarter in 2025 or either the first quarter in 2026 from a calendar year
It's 6
perspective.
months.
So
Standard.
councillors,
Mustn't
as Mr Borgelt's asked a question and he's here in person, do any of you have a question from the floor? No, I see none. So you have another question,
Well,
please?
the
You'd
next
like?
one's a bit more successful than that one. I thought it was so simple. I'm asking for a date within a month or so. Maybe I should get complicated again. And here's another simple one. Who decides on the carnival operator? Will the councillors or will the council staff make the decision re the next Lakes Entrance Carnival EIO, and why one or the other?
Thank you. And again, Mayor, we'll get Ms Johnson to respond to that question.
Thank you, CEO, and through you, Mayor, and thank you for the question. So the EOI process obviously will go out to public, and then there'll be an internally convened panel that will look at the merits against some evaluation criteria of whom would be the recommended carnival operator as part of that process. It would be under delegation, so I couldn't quite answer if it would be a council-based decision yet or it would be via the CEO-based decision. However, it would be guided by the council's policy on our leasing and licensing, which is a council-approved document.
Well, you've done enough of these EIOs and you've done them both ways. Can't you come up with a decision to tell me which way you're going to go? The situation's known.
So again, if I can extend that a little bit, we'll obviously have some clear evaluation criteria that will go out to market, and then they will be assessed as part of that evaluation criteria.
That's a normal EIO, and then either the council decides or the CEO decides.
Yep, correct. And at this point, I would be suggesting that it would be made under delegation of the CEO. However, the council always has the opportunity, should they want
So
to.
why? You haven't given me why.
Why?
Why the CEO?
Excuse me, Mr Borgelt. Could you just please? Your question's been answered, and
Well, it hasn't been answered.
But
Why it would be the CEO and not the councillors?
So,
And every other time except
all
once,
right.
it's
Well,
always been the councillors.
the CEO's obviously
So,
happy to respond.
if I could take you back to Ms Johnson's answer, which is the why is because that's how the policy around leasings and licences is outlined. So we would be following the policy. So the council, though, has the opportunity, if they wish, to bring a decision to the council to make. So at a later date, where we're closer to being in a position to determine the new lease licensee, whichever one, sorry, the council could determine that they would want to make that decision rather than have it delegated to the CEO. But at this point in time, because it's still some time away, as Ms Johnson has explained, that decision hasn't been made and the council hasn't indicated whether they'd like to make that decision. So that's why at this stage, because we're talking about some months away, we can't provide you with a more definitive answer. We're happy to provide you with an answer closer to the time when those decisions have been made about who will be making the decision, whether we'll be following the policy and it will be made under delegation, or whether the council would like to make the decision themselves.
Sounds like you make the decision by tossing a coin.
Well, I think you've had an answer, and I think it's quite self-explanatory that this is for a carnival that may or may not come to Lakes Entrance in the Christmas break. So that is months and months away from a decision of who it may be, and what the time frame may be, and what the lease agreement may be. So you have got to give the process. You've got to give the process time.
Time. It's process. I'm asking a question about process.
Which
I'm
was
not getting an answer.
Yes, it was. It was answered. It was answered in the fact that you've been told the way it works, and you've been given an approximate time about when it may occur. So I must answer. Councillor Buckley's got her hand up, so she wishes probably to ask you a question, which I would ask if there are any other questions from councillors also. But go ahead, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Morris, for your question. I suppose it's more of a comment that that we've heard what you've had to say, and they're valid questions, and we will in due course, making sure that we're in our time constraints, get an answer back to you. And you have had your 5 minutes, and I really do appreciate that you're passionate and that you come in and talk to us about these things. So thank you.
Councillor Eastman, you've got no? Okay.
No.
Just getting ready for another time. Microphone's on. That's fine.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so thank you, Mr Borgelt.
Thank you.
And
I'll make them simpler next time.
thank you again. Now, we're up to 1.7.3, which is public submissions, and we have 4 speakers for tonight's meeting. They wish to speak to items 5.1.1, another at 5.1.2 and another at 5.1.3. So they will be called upon at the item to make their submission prior to us getting the officer's recommendations. So if you're okay to wait until those items come up. Now, 1.8 is items for noting. So in accordance with section 54, in brackets 5, in brackets B of the Local Government Act, a copy of the Audit and Risk Committee biannual report is to be tabled and subsequently recorded in the minutes of the meeting. And moving forward now, I will ask the CEO, are there any notices of motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor. We have received no notices of motion.
All right, how about deferred business?
And we have no deferred business listed for this evening.
Good, thank you. And at item 4, it is delegates' reports. So, councillors, I encourage you to submit your delegate reports to be included in the minutes of this meeting. So that leads us now to the officer reports. And the first one is 5.1.1. So, a planning permit application, 5.2023.350.1, timber harvesting and regeneration on private land at 959 Murrungower Road, Cabbage Tree Creek. Council's reconsideration. So I'll now ask Mr Ian Long to come forward to make his submission, and Mr Long, you will have 5 minutes speaking time.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for making the time available tonight to, I suppose, hear what's been a long journey for the proponent, Mr John McConaughey. It can only be best described as a journey. If you'll allow me to indulge a little bit of background in terms of where the process has taken John. He purchased the property in 2003 at Murrungower with a view to running a few cows. He's a timber harvesting contractor, and he also saw the opportunity to undertake harvesting on that land with a commercial crop. So that was his intent from the word go. I suppose his real journey started when he had to apply for and get a permit to undertake the timber harvesting. So as I said, if you can indulge me for a little while, I'll just try and run through the chronology, if you like, of the processes. So after John sought a permit for the timber harvesting in 2006, that was duly granted. In doing so, he had to engage the Department of Sustainability and Environment at that point in time to undertake a comprehensive flora and fauna survey, which was undertaken, and they supported the timber harvesting plan and the application. In about 2009, the state experienced some significant wildfires, and John was actually taken offline from his timber harvesting to go into salvage, and as a result, he had very little chance to actually undertake the harvesting on his land. In 2010, he sought an extension of that permit, which was duly granted. He was still involved in the very extensive timber salvage post-fires, and in 2014 he sought another extension, but that extension was denied on the basis that he had not conducted enough work, and the activity was, at that stage of the game, was coming under the native vegetation guidelines, so there was a legislative change, and that basically said that the timber harvesting on private land was not permissible without providing biodiversity offsets, so that became very difficult. In around 2018, with that hiatus, there was a change in the Planning Act for native timber harvesting where it became a permissible activity, providing regeneration and improved biological or ecological condition scores were achieved. In 2019, we commenced work with DECA to prepare a property vegetation plan, or a PVP, which required significant further surveys to meet the legislative change. In 2023, a PVP provisional approval was provided to Mr McConaughey to attach to a planning application. Unfortunately, there was a significant amount of time lost in discussion between DECA and the Shire, and during that period there was yet another legislative change. In November 2023, there was an amendment made to the PVP format and a requirement for further ecological surveys. In 2024, February, that PVP was finally approved and signed by DECA. That PVP is the instrument that supports the biodiversity issues behind the planning application. In 2024, there was a council meeting to hear John's planning application. After much discussion, it was decided to refer the decision to the Minister under the provisions of the legislation. That was in August 24. In October 24, we were advised that the referral had been sent to the Minister. Nothing heard, and it wasn't until January 2025 that the Minister responded saying that it's really a responsibility of Council, it's all yours again. So here we are, it's back with the Council after what's clearly a very long and protracted effort on Mr McConaughey's behalf. As I said, it's been a 20-year plus journey for him. It's cost him to date in the vicinity of $65,000 to meet the legislative requirements and undertake the surveys. He's complied with everything thrown at him. So, you know, obviously given that passage of 20 years, there's been changes to local government, there's been changes to state government, there's been massive changes to legislation, and he's had to wear every one of those. So he has a perfect compliance history with DNRE regarding the permit granted in 2006, with DELP at the commencement of the PVP process, and most recently with DECA. He's undertaken further surveys, and given the passage of time and changes of state and federal legislation, there's probably a few more steps to go through.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Long. You've used all the available time in the 5 minutes.
Sorry.
Oh,
One thing I
seriously?
would like to say, if I may just finish up.
I think I'll allow that. Yes.
Thank you. It basically, I'd like to commend the Shire planning staff with the way they've dealt with this planning application. Clearly, it can be an emotive issue in the community, but at the end of the day, they've dealt with the laws, the statutes available to them, and they've worked through it clinically and come up with the right outcome. So thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll move to the General Manager of Place and Community. Sorry, please stay there. A little voice in my ears just said that councillors, would you like to ask any questions of Mr Long? Of clarification, yes. Well, you've done a very good job. You've explained yourself very well.
Thanks, Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'd like to introduce Mr Stevenson to please present your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled Planning Permit Application, Timber Harvesting and Regeneration on Private Land, 959 Murrungower Road, Cabbage Tree Creek. And it's also titled Council Reconsideration. The application has been made subject to notice and 8 public objections were received. The objections are made in relation to environment and biodiversity concerns and are made by representation of several environmental groups and also by individuals. The application required referral to the Department of Transport and Planning and the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action. Both authorities support the planning permit subject to conditions. The assessment of the application against the provisions of the East Gippsland Planning Scheme is that it is made in accordance with the guidelines for the destruction, removal, lopping of native vegetation of DELP 2017, and therefore the proposal is consistent with the framework established for native timber harvesting and can be supported. The application is also generally in accordance with the associated planning policy framework and zone and overlay controls. The concerns of the community are noted, and specifically it is noted that the recommendation includes conditions which direct the permit applicant to undertake due diligence in relation to matters of Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act requirements which may affect the permit and its implementation. At the 27th of August 2024 meeting, Council resolved to make a Section 97C request to the Minister for Planning to consider the application. Included in the attachments is the Minister's response advising she would not consider the application. A determination must be made by Council. The Officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant the planning permit, subject to conditions outlined in Attachment 1, which I'll note we've slightly amended to the agenda item. I've also have Martin Richardson present here tonight to help answer any questions, of a technical nature. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will ask councillors, do you have any questions on this item? Was that a yes? No, that's fine. Councillor Crook, please ask.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple of questions here I think will be in the public interest. Specifically, some of the objectors have raised concerns around threatened species, particularly those listed under the federal legislation, the Environment Conservation Biodiversity Act. I understand that there are federally listed threatened species within the area covered by the application. I wonder if you could just step us through the process by which they are to be considered and whether that is in fact within Council's remit.
Thank you, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. Yes, so the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, Commonwealth legislation, requires anyone who is undertaking an action which is likely to have an impact on threatened biodiversity to self-refer to the Commonwealth. Council doesn't have a role in requiring or even requesting people to refer matters to the Commonwealth for consideration under the EPBC Act. The obligation is on the proponent to understand the possible implications of their actions and to refer any actions which are likely to require assessment under that Act directly to the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Further to that, I also understand that there's separate state legislation for the protection of threatened species and rare plants and as such. The application goes to some length to detail some of those values and to exclude those from the area that will be subject to the logging activity. Is it the case that the laws are structured differently for such forestry operations on private land than they are to operations of the same similar nature but in the public estate, operations which we've recently seen outlawed in Victoria, at least in part as a consequence of concern around the same threatened species?
Look, councillor, I don't know the detail of that distinction, unfortunately, as to whether there is a distinction between operations on private land and public land. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question right now. But what I can say is that the property vegetation plan, which has been endorsed by DECA, does take account of biodiversity values. The plan outlines a range of measures to be taken to protect those values, and that's the information on which the recommendation is based.
Okay, thanks for that. And finally, Mayor, if I may, Council has previously spent quite a considerable amount of time developing a fairly detailed and what has previously been termed a comprehensive policy around forestry operations, what the Council has previously considered to be acceptable and otherwise. In your view, does this application meet with the requirements of our own policy?
Thanks, councillor. So the policy has 3 statements, or the position statement has 3 statements in it, one of which is that, from memory, Council supports the retention of a sustainable native timber harvesting industry in East Gippsland. It then goes on to talk about the Council's preference for its preference against clear fell harvesting and its preference for selective logging, and I think there is the nuance. So selective harvesting is a term which is used, and the term which is used here is slightly different. But I would regard the method of logging proposed in this proposal to be broadly consistent with Council's preference, which is no clear felling. And then the third item relates to value adding or looking for high value timber products as opposed to, I guess, firewood. I would regard the proposal to be broadly consistent with Council's position.
Okay, thanks for your views.
Well, just before you go, Councillor Davis, Councillor Buckley, you've had your hand up. You've got a question. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, through you, Mayor. My question relates to the enforcement, which was raised by the objectors, and there is, I suppose, an explanation would be good in regards to how the compliance monitoring report would be presented and how that will be done.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, for your question. So there's been some discussion around the council table about that. There is an agreement in place that would be in place between council and DECA for the, if you like, the monitoring and enforcement of the property vegetation plan. But to provide what I think the lawyers might call a belts and braces approach, there is a proposed condition in the permit which provides that within 6 months of the harvesting operations commencing and in 6 monthly intervals, there should be compliance monitoring report provided to the satisfaction of council that provides details of that compliance with all conditions of the permit. I would expect that that condition will be enforced, and the compliance monitoring report will be provided to council, and that under the agreement that we would have with DECA, that we would then work with DECA to ensure that the appropriate expertise is provided to review and audit that report.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
No, sorry, Mayor, I was just pointing out that Councillor Buckley was waiting.
I'll take that as not a question. Thanks for the advice. Councillor Eastman, you do have your microphone on, so you have a question?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just a query about the percentage of land that this represents in terms of the total forested land for East Gippsland. Have we got any, is it a large amount compared to the total forested land?
I'd say the answer is no, it's not a large amount compared to the amount of forest in East Gippsland. That would be my direct answer. This is a property of some couple of hundred hectares. I don't know the number for the amount of forest in East Gippsland, but it's thousands and thousands of hectares. About 70%, I think.
You may get some support from behind you. Mr Long put his hand up, so he may know the answer to that. Do you?
The total area harvested is 52.08 hectares over about 4 to 5 years. We put in context to the tens of thousands of hectares of public forest that are now protected. That puts some context to it.
Thank you for that. So So if that's all the questions we have for our officers, we do have a motion. So I could ask for a councillor to move, please.
Mayor, I'd just like to seek an amendment to that motion. Do I need to have the motion, does the motion need to be moved first, or could I seek an amendment already? Maybe it has to be moved first, I think.
Not necessarily.
governance advice on
You've
that.
actually gone first before anyone has actually moved the motion. I think it's probably, I'm watching Ms Johnson down there, but I think it's plausible and part of the rules that you could move an amendment to the motion.
Yes, I mean, just for
but
clarity, I'm
also
not
you
seeking an
need a
alternate
seconder.
motion. It would just be an amendment.
Yes, that's what I said, amendment, and you will need a seconder, I believe.
Okay, I did went to some lengths before to try and articulate.
Trustees?
It's just his motion, so he doesn't necessarily
You're right, Tom. Go for it.
move it and then there's
Yes.
So I'm not sure if we can get those words up on the
I think
screen.
we can. So I
Can
think, if I
we?
may, I think what Councillor Cook is seeking to do is to move the officer's recommendation with an amendment.
I'm actually just seeking
'Cause
to
there
make
is
an
no motion.
amendment to the officer's recommendation.
I think we'll get there. Please proceed. You may read what's on the screen.
So it's literally just an addition of the words which we can see on the screen in blue there. So that's the only change that I'm proposing. If we just scroll back down to where we were, councillors would note that there are a range of conditions for if
There we
this
go.
application is approved that will apply to the application. My amendment seeks to include that geospatial data is provided to the satisfaction of the responsible authority for those areas that have been marked for exclusion from the logging operation itself. So I'm happy to speak to that. If I need a seconder, then I'd like somebody to second that inclusion.
I understand that there is no need. Slight pause.
It means that they've mapped.
Thank you. What we have before us is Councillor Crook is moving the officer recommendation, but he is noting that he's wanting the councillors to note that the conditions that would apply, which are referred to as attachment 1 in the officer recommendation, have been slightly modified to include the highlighted phrase and geospatial data provided to the satisfaction of the responsible authority.
So if it's okay with you, Mayor, it wasn't actually my intention to move the officer's recommendation, but if that's the process that makes it easier for everybody, then so be it.
For clarity, it's to adopt the officer's recommendation,
Adopt
I
the
believe,
officer's recommendation.
with that amendment. Thank you.
With that amendment, I would like just to speak to the amendment, if that's okay, rather than to the whole, rather than to the officer's recommendation per se.
Okay, so I'll just ask the question of officers, does it require a seconder from that position, please?
Yeah. We require you to move the recommendation if you want to speak to the change. If you don't, another way to have been done that would have been to
Somebody else
change
to
the
move
recommendation,
the motion and then for me to move an amendment?
or to change the recommendation that you're moving to note the addition of this one phrase in the
Look, I think so as not to
conditions.
tie ourselves up. It makes no material difference who moves the officer's recommendation. If I don't, another councillor is very likely to, would be my understanding. So I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation with the proposed amendment. Is there a seconder?
Good. Yes. Do we have a seconder to this motion with a very small adjustment?
So I'm sorry, I'm not seconding, I'm querying something. Are we allowed to ask the effect of the amendment? without moving to second
I
it?
guess because we've had no, we'll call it forewarning, that yes, I would allow that you could ask a question, probably
you.
of an officer. Yes.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Martin.
councillor, yes. So look, the effect of the amendment is simply to provide more detail around that condition. So the condition is an important one because it relates to the exclusion of vegetation with biodiversity values. The reason for the additional wording there is to ensure that not only are the measures located in the area, but that we are provided with information about how, and geospatially on the ground, where those exclusion measures are put. It's a good recommendation, and the officers would agree with the change.
Thank you.
All right, so Councillor Farquhar, are you seconding this
No,
motion?
I was going to ask a question, if I could.
Another one. Okay,
Let
we're
Bernie
going
ask
backwards
and then I'll
here, but
second.
as I said before, we've sort of, this has come as a, not as a shock, but it's something that we weren't prepared for, so I think you have a right to ask a question.
Is the geospatial data already provided in the original permit?
No, not to my knowledge. So there are plans within the planning application that obviously identify, and the PVP has information in it that identifies biodiversity values. This comes down to when the proposal is implemented, actually literally putting the stakes in the ground and ribbons around them. So the plans do obviously identify where the values are. This condition is about implementation, and it's about ensuring that when the workers are on the site, that the vegetation is properly demarcated. Yeah.
Mayor, can I just, I think we need to go back to understanding what it is that Councillor Crook is moving. And I think we might need to actually amend the motion to say with the following changes, because otherwise the changes are not being debated by council, the full motion is. So I think we need to go back to the motion that is before council, so that council understands, and if we could perhaps bring that up. So the subject to, and we might want to say, put something about a minor amendment to the permit conditions to address the need for geospatial,
Delineation of values in
Yeah.
the field and subsequent inspection in order to achieve compliance outcomes.
so I think the, so if we could, if the councillor group could just bear with us, we'll get that up onto the screen so that you can see that it is actually slightly different to the officer recommendation.
So Councillor Buckley, are you happy to be on pause for a moment, or you've got a question as well? So perhaps while the officers are trying to rearrange the motion, you may like to ask a question.
Thank you, Mayor. My question just relates to that this amendment is only subject to the exclusion zones.
Councillor, the amendment that's proposed, the change to the officer's recommendation that's proposed by Councillor Crook is a minor change to a condition, one condition, that gives it further clarity, yes. Has no substantial effect on the overall decision, other than to give further clarity to one condition about protecting biodiversity vegetation.
Which is only subject to the exclusion zone.
That's right. Anything which is in the exclusion zone, it's really just about how it's fenced.
Great. Well, I'd like to foreshadow that I'm happy to second the motion, Mayor, when you start proceedings.
Okay, so I think we now can put the motion back up, Mayor.
All right. So with this amendment, I ask, would somebody like to move this motion?
Sorry, it should be minor amendment, not amendments.
I wonder, Mayor, would it be simpler if I withdrew my moving of the officer's recommendation, let another councillor move the officer's recommendation, should they see fit, and I will then seek to add a small amendment to that recommendation, which was my original intent, rather than to move the officer's recommendation.
That's probably not such a bad idea. So in actual fact,
so I'm happy.
you actually got in really quickly.
Okay.
But perhaps we'll go back to old school and ask
Just
for...
call for a motion.
Yes, and ask for
Thank you, Mayor.
a mover of this motion. So do I have a mover?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Eastman.
Mayor, I'd like to propose a minor amendment to the moved motion.
Could you please tell us what your minor amendment is?
Yes, so it would be a
Councillor
change
Cook?
to one of the conditions, Mayor, if the officer's recommendation is approved with the existing conditions, it would be to include an additional measure around the gathering of information around where the exclusion zones, as have been referred to, exist in space within the application boundary. These areas would normally be tagged with flagging tape or spray painted marks on trees to provide guidance to the logging crew about where to drive the bulldozers and where not, in accordance with the planning permit. This addition would provide further clarity to all parties around where those areas are by marking those areas with a GPS, a geographical spatial information device that marks things in space and time, so that information is recorded and able to be referred to when the application gets to the stage where compliance audits are undertaken and regeneration is required and, further down the track.
I'll just... Yes. Okay, so I'm just viewing this as technology has got way ahead of us. I myself, I'm probably stuck in a time warp in all this, but...
Common practice in the public estate.
I must ask Councillor Farquhar, are you in agreement of this alteration?
No, not in agreement to the alteration.
Okay. So do we go to now... We have a seconder, and if he's not in agreement, that just really means that your alteration now is gone.
Doesn't exist.
So you need to move an amendment, which would then become the substantive motion. If your amendment, if you move this as an amendment,
I am seeking to move this as an amendment.
You will need a seconder, and then you can speak to the motion once it's seconded.
All right,
I
so
will
we've gone back
I will
to...
need a seconder. It's my understanding.
Yes, you will need a seconder. Now it's got to this stage. So is there a seconder for this alteration? Councillor Buckley, you're seconding it?
Yes, I'm seconding the motion. It seems like a reasonable step forward.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I understand that I can now speak to the motion, Mayor.
That is correct.
So, councillors, it would be common practice, and as you've seen in the property vegetation plan, to identify areas of biodiversity values within areas subject to logging activities. These are typically, appear on the maps, which we have all seen. Those areas are then subsequently delineated, marked in the field, so as to ensure that people on bulldozers and with chainsaws don't transgress those boundaries. And it's normally done with spray paint, it's normally done with bright pink or blue flagging tape, and it's just about marking those areas in the field so we're all clear where the boundaries of the operation are and aren't. This additional measure would go one step further in when the person whose job it is to mark or spray paint the trees or put up the flagging tape, they will actually be following a GPS. That's generally how these things are done. In the olden days, John, it would have been done with a hip and chain and a topographic map. These days we use a little computer that talks to satellites, tells us where you are in space and time as you walk around. You use a GPS and you say, okay, this is where the boundary is, and you walk along the line following the map on your little device and you mark the trees accordingly so people who are undertaking the operation can see where they're allowed and not allowed to go in accordance with the plan. This will just see that information is recorded and to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, which is our planning department. So in future, after the operation has finished and in accordance with the other conditions and in accordance with the law, and the operation is audited against whether it's followed the approved plan or not, those judgments can be made objectively. Because in my experience, when buffers are marked and then for whatever reason those guidelines aren't followed, the little pieces of tape or the trees with the marks on have a tendency to also disappear. So this will provide an assurance to people who are concerned that the rules are being followed, that the rules are in fact being followed. It will provide an objective set of information around where those lines on the maps are marked out in the ground, irrespective of what happens to the pieces of paint or tape.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Now I'll call on Councillor Buckley. Would you also like to speak to this
Yes, thank you.
this amendment or
Yes.
this amended motion? Yes.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Look, I think that it's been recommended by the officers as well as Councillor Crook. I think it's a great opportunity for the proponent to be able to put in place best management practices. We are setting a precedent with this motion, one that will be welcomed for sustainable timber harvesting for our region. And it's a great opportunity to say that we have world's best management practices, and using modern technology to ensure that we can do this right, do it well for what is a renewable timber industry, will be the right step forward for into the future when we decide to open up more areas for harvesting. So I would commend the amendment to the motion to ensure that we get our best management practices and our best foot forward. And in also, I must say in a brief comment that the proponent has gone, is obviously a very determined person to persevere for so long. And I think we should support him in showing that we can do this extremely well, and that we can be proud of our region and acknowledge the economic value that it has for our towns and the region itself. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. So I'll ask the question, is anyone opposed to this motion? Would you like to speak? Your opposition.
Thank you, Mayor. I think all these lines are already covered under the PVP. So, and I do not think Council has the capability of monitoring such things, which is already identified and will be in the agreement that is signed with the proponent and with DECA. So I do not see it as something that we should be endorsing.
Good, thank you, Councillor Farquhar. So any other councillors would like to speak for or against the proposed motion? I see none. So, Councillor Crook, you actually have a right of reply at this
Thanks.
stage.
Sure, and just to speak to Councillor Farquhar's concerns there, as we would all be aware, Council doesn't possess the technical capacity to administer this operation as a requirement of the Land and Environment Act, as would normally be fit. So the workaround, if you like, for that is that we are asking the proponent to engage a suitably qualified person to perform that regulatory function or to gather that information around compliance on our behalf. For such a person to either use, this will make that job, this amendment will make that job easier and more rigorous for those consultants. It will produce further assurity to the public, the council and the operator that what is in that consultant's report is in fact a true reflection of what has occurred on the ground under a permit issued by us. It does not impose any significant further burden on the applicant or the council. It just provides greater clarity and transparency for everyone involved.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. So that leaves us to the voting stage. So all those in favour of this application in its current form. So you may vote. Sorry. Yes, the amendment. Sorry, my apologies. On the amended motion, those people who.
It's the amendment, we're passing the amendment.
There we go.
It's the officer's motion with my amendment, or our amendment.
Yep, so
So,
we're voting on the amendment. If it fails, we go back to the original motion, which is put forward by Councillor Farquhar.
okay, so all those in favour? 1, 2, 3. Okay,
And the motion is
those
lost.
against? Okay, for the record, we have four councillors who have voted for the amendment and 5 councillors who have voted against. So therefore the amendment is defeated, and we will go back to the original motion. Do we need to start the speaking again, or can we
We can ask
just
people
get...
to speak to the motion.
Yes, so can we just, you moved that original motion, so we got a seconder in councillor... Yes, that's second. So,
You get to speak to it then.
yes. Well, you spoke to it. Councillor Eastman, she doesn't wish to speak to it. Thank you. So, therefore we go again? Try. Yes, so all those councillors who are in favour of this. Sorry.
Sorry, Mayor, you might want to ask if there's...
Speakers for or against the motion?
I thought we'd done that. No, okay, all right. Anyone against?
Or if anyone else would like to speak for the motion.
Well, we've had the 2 speakers, so the next is anyone against the motion? Yes, and Councillor Eastman has declined, so you wish to speak against?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Despite the confusion, we have heard from officers this evening that this plan is largely consistent with the policy of this council which governs such operations. I don't agree with that assertion or that view. Our council policy on these operations clearly states that they are to be, that the end product is to be of a high value nature. The majority of the end product is to be for high-end, high-value use. Anybody who's read the plan can see that the majority of the wood that will result from this operation will end up as fibre, probably exported from Eden via Pentarch's mill there. The next biggest volume will be firewood, and the smallest proportion will be high-end timber products that will, if what I've been told is true, will potentially end up at Fennings Mill here in Bairnsdale. Now, I'll make the point that I am not opposed to native forest logging operations. In fact, in the right form, I'm a thorough supporter of them. But our council has a policy that spells out quite clearly the conditions under which which we need to take into consideration, and they are that the operations predominantly provide high-value end products. This operation does not. The other element to our policy that this operation fails to adhere to is around what they refer to as clear-fell logging. So we've heard that this operation isn't a clear-fell logging operation. But this logging operation also isn't a selective logging operation, as our own council's policy clearly identifies as a requirement. This policy is what's referred to as variable retention harvesting. There is no definition for variable retention harvesting, and there can be no audit of compliance on whether or not this operation has adhered to that silvicultural system, because there is no definition for it. We approached the proponent to adhere to our policy and for it to be a selective logging operation. They refused. They refused because it's simpler and easier and more cost expedient for them to conduct a variable retention harvesting operation, which, while the terminology may differ, in my experience, very closely resembles a clear-fell logging operation. I have various other concerns. I would really like to reiterate that I'm not against native forestry at all. But I think that it is very important, especially in the modern day, that our council is considerate of all the suite of values that our forests contain and the nuance required in how these operations are undertaken. And while I appreciate the large amount of effort that's gone into this and the long period of time that's gone into this application, it still doesn't meet the requirements of our own policy. And so on principle, this is why we have policies to aid us in making these decisions. I can't support it on principle because it's not in accordance with our own policy.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other councillors who wish to speak for or against? Okay, that gives you the right of reply, Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Councillor Crook, for your comments there. I think we're overlooking the part that this is a private enterprise and it's on a private property. It's not like Crown land. It's not going to be like the old RFA's operations. We have a Section 69 in place with the owner to make sure that these requirements are met and that the buffer zones are clearly identified, and that's all in that vegetation plan. So I think I can appreciate that this is a landmark sort of decision we are making tonight, and it may open the gates to other properties doing the same thing, but I think we've got it right in the letter of the law, the way we are working and the way it's been submitted, the time that it's taken to actually put the submissions together. I believe that the agreement between the private owner and DECA will ensure that it's done properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. So, at this stage, I will put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Crook. So we have 8. Oh, sorry, Sonia, I missed you down there, but could you please vote, were you for or against? I did miss you.
I was for, Mayor.
You were for, okay, thank you. So we have 8 councillors for and 1 against, but the motion is passed. That was went a little bit over time. So our next report is item 5.1.2, which is an amended development plan for Brookfield Lakes Estate at 135 Great Alpine Road, Lucknow, and it's a modified subdivision layout. So before this report is presented, I will ask Mr. Mitchell Webstale to come forward and make his submission, and to remind you that you have 5 minutes, but before you begin to speak, I must say that Councillor Eastman, this is the item that she had declared her conflict of interest, so now has left the room. So, thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and thanks for the opportunity for letting me speak tonight on the proposed amendment to the Brookfield Lakes Development Plan. Now, I'm not much of a public speaker, so I'm going to read from my notes, if that's all right. Back in 2020, my wife, Krisha, and I owned a property in Eastwood, but after having a special needs child, we decided it would be better for his development to have a property with some room for him to run around, with fewer neighbours restricting his and our lifestyle. Having spent a lot of time researching the market, we found a property at 24 Goose Gully Heights. As part of our pre-purchase due diligence, we reviewed the council-approved development plan that was in place for Brookfield Lakes, and noted that although the land to our east was zoned residential, the plan stipulated that only 2 larger residential lots would abut our eastern boundary. This provided us comfort knowing that we would have a buffer between our rural living zone property and the more intensive development further to the east. This guarantee gave us comfort we needed to proceed, and we went ahead with what was for us a very significant investment. We have enjoyed the rural setting our property has provided until we received notice that the Brookfield Lakes developer was seeking to amend the development plan to significantly increase the level of intensification of their holding. I understand Council has already approved the developer's request to amend the use of from the residential subdivision of 99 lots to a residential village containing 151 unregistered movable dwellings, a 52% increase in intensification. Now the developer seeks to increase the number of allotments that abut our property from 2 to 7, a 250% increase in intensification. We strongly object to this request as it will have a significant impact on our family's lifestyle and enjoyment. At the time the original development plan was approved in October 2011, long before we purchased our property, my father was the General Manager of Development at East Gippsland Shire and in fact signed off on this documentation. In recent conversations, he stated that the plan has spent considerable time ensuring the existing rural residential landowners had their amenity and lifestyle protected by providing a buffer from intensive smaller lot development. They finally concluded the provision of larger 1,000+ square metre lots running along the northwest corner of the subdivision would provide the best balance. The plan actually states that residential development of a variety of lot sizes responds to the topography and position of the site, including standard housing lots and lower density larger lots on the edge of the development. A note from the officer's recommendation, they are recommending that rather than provide an appropriate interface as outlined in the original plan, they propose building setbacks of 4 metres and a standard 1.8 metre timber fence. These amendments will not resolve the concerns we have been raising for many months. Should the current quest be approved, we will have 7 new neighbours sitting below us. Given the topography of the land, we will be seeing directly into their backyards and homes, and they will look directly into our living areas. All privacy of our outdoor living space will be gone. We currently have rural fencing that we assume will not be acceptable in a residential setting. A standard pine residential fence does not fit the existing neighbourhood character of a rural living zone, nor does it solve any of the privacy issues. And who will pay for the installation and maintenance of the new fence? We have large established trees running along the boundary that drop limbs regularly throughout of storm events. This is not suitable for an intense residential setting. Given the size of these trees, a building setback of only 4 metres is not appropriate and will create a major safety hazard. We are also concerned that council officers may now also support, sometime into the future, the rezoning of the old Goose Gully Golf Course, potentially creating another high-intensity residential subdivision along our southern boundary. Given our concerns, we respectfully request that councillors consider the following two options. The creation of a drainage reserve, 10 metres wide, that runs along our eastern boundary of ours and our neighbours' property. Or place a road network against the eastern boundary, similar to that provided at the southwest end of the development. Both options allow for stormwater infrastructure and swale drains to pick up water sheeting off our blocks and from our current stormwater discharge point. They provide greater clearances from future housing and potential large trees hazards, and they provide rural living zone properties the privacy and environment in which we purchased our properties for. If these options are not considered appropriate, as a minimum, we would like to see the original controls maintained and the current approved plan in which we purchased our property under remain unchanged. Thank you.
Absolutely perfect. 5 minutes. So before you go, just you're not off the hook yet. Just if there's any questions from councillors. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for your submission. So if I'm understanding correctly, a 10 metre offset rather than the proposed 4 metre with a fence, a 10 metre offset, you've suggested a drainage corridor or something. I think they might need to be where watercourses and stuff are, but let's just go back to the, would you be happy with the existing proposal if there was that 10 metre offset? Is that what you're telling us?
The 10 metres and then the newer amount of lots, that'd be something we could be happy to consider, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, well, thank you, Mitchell.
Thanks for your time, guys.
And now I think we have Bernie Eastman. Is he present? Yes. So if you would like to come forward, thank you for your attendance. And same applies, 5 minutes to speak to us.
Thank you, Mayor. I probably won't take anywhere near 5 minutes now because Mitch has pretty much covered everything that I'll be going through. Name is Bernie Eastman. Myself and Robin have been resident at Goose Gully, 95 Doyles Road for 32 years. And just from the outset, I want to make it known that obviously we've known about the actual proposals for Brookfield Lakes for, well, 13, 14 years, having known the initial owners, etc., etc. We weren't necessarily overjoyed with the fact of 2 lots abutting our land, but we figured that was a pretty reasonable sort of outcome at that time. So obviously it came as a shock when the developer wanted to change that and put 7 lots right behind us. Those changes significantly alter the intent, purpose or outcome of the approved development plan, and that statement comes direct from your own planning policy, development plan policy. We've obviously spoken to Shire officers, expressed our concerns, we've listened to suggested alternatives, and then we're awaiting further advice, obviously. Then we noticed activity on Orrs Road when they started to construct basically an access point for further works to be carried out. That prompted a letter to councillors, which you all would have got, I'm sure. We were advised in correspondence on 31st of January that no decision had been made in relation to the proposed amendments, yet construction on the area shown as stage 10 on the staging plan continued. It also appears to include a new road, just appears to include a new road as is drawn onto the proposed plan that the developer has put forward. So obviously we're a bit concerned about that. I reckon the developer's taking a fair risk to do that if he hasn't already got approval for a planning permit, subdivision, engineering drawings and such. So it prompted us to again ask the question whether approval's already been given for that change to stage 10. Just as an aside too, when this issue first came to light, we got a copy of a staging plan which showed 12 stages. All right? In your agenda, the staging plan actually now only shows 11 stages, and it also shows a change to the sequencing of those stages. Now, this information has not been given to us before this. That's on page 146 of your agenda. Report also makes reference to affordable housing and diversity of development. This proposal removes all opportunity for diversity. And I would have thought the developer would look to attract a range of buyers, those in trades, you know, other people with trailers and caravans and boats and whatever. There's no opportunity for them to fit any of those items onto these smaller lots. Now, an argument against the larger lots would possibly be that anyone who bought one could possibly then look to subdivide it straight away. I don't know whether it would be something the Shire could deal with in terms of maybe a section 173 or something like that to put a time limit on any of those changes taking place. I'm not sure, but probably worth considering. You know, to be frank, we're not in Cranbourne or Clyde North, we're in Bairnsdale. And if you drive around the estate, you could be forgiven for thinking otherwise. I'd also like to talk about the traffic plan, the traffic information that's been provided. It's been provided on the basis of old information. In fact, it's been provided on the basis of information that comes out of the initial development plan. It's certainly before any decision was made in relation to the super lot that Mitch did refer to at Lamandra Drive. The traffic information refers to the super lot being a retirement village. Well, how long is it since that has been the case? It's no longer a retirement village. It provides for 151 residential dwellings. So if you apply that logic to the traffic's report, you can actually end up with an increase in traffic activity of almost 30%. So I think, if nothing else, that's something the Shire needs to look at in terms of that report. And it's not about the science. I don't understand the science of it. It's more about its proper application. Another point I'd like to make, and this is after discussions with 4 of the, we'll call them submitters, to the actual retirement village proposal in Lamandra Drive. Your agenda indicates that they had been advised of this development Well, of those 4, they couldn't recall any information, although one did mention that there was some letter received where that person was invited to press a link and get that information from Shire.
Okay, I'll let that continue. You've done very well. You've used up 5.5 minutes,
Oh,
so
have I?
how about that?
Sorry about that.
It's a good effort.
Yeah, all right.
Now, so councillors, other questions from Mr Eastman? Councillor Crook, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for your submission. It's very information-rich.
Yeah.
I'm struggling a little to distill the most salient point out of it. Are you asking a specific thing of council here tonight?
Well, I didn't get to the end of my submission.
Maybe this will
and
provide you
I
with an
will, if you
opportunity
don't mind, I'll
to
just
articulate
read
your
that.
conclusion.
That'll answer your question.
Please.
On behalf of Robin and myself, I respectfully request that you reject the recommendation before you.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty clear.
Yes, good answer. To the point. Yes. Okay, thank you. So now we will move on.
Sorry for taking so long.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, I would now like to ask our General Manager of Place and Community, Mr Stevenson, would you please present your report?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled Amended Development Plan, Brookfield Lakes Estate, 135 Great Alpine Road, Lucknow. The amended development plan is consistent with planning policy and general residential zone and provides additional residential land supply within this area of Bensdale. The amended development plan was the subject of a community consultation and 8 submissions were received. The submissions raised concern about increased density, increased traffic, amenity and interface issues. Council officers sought to mitigate some of the concerns, especially those raised by the 2 adjoining submitters, by negotiating amended permit conditions with the proponent. The 2 adjoining submitters have been kept up to date about the progress, proposed conditions and decision-making process. While the proposed conditions go some way to satisfying the concerns raised, as you've just heard, the adjoining submitters still have concern about the increased density, especially along their boundary. However, in considering this, the officer's recommendation is to approve the amended development plan subject to amended planning permit conditions outlined in the council report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for... Yes, Councillor Crook. Is it for Mr Richardson or Mr Stevenson?
Mr Stevenson.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Gee, we've seen a few applications for this patch of land now. I'm struggling a little to keep up. But my understanding is that this latest application represents an intensification or an increase in lot yield compared to its predecessor or the most recent one prior to it. Could you just elaborate for the benefit of everybody, myself included, what the difference in the density is between the previous application and the current one before us tonight?
I might just refer to Mr Richardson if that's okay, because I think he's got the exact numbers in front of him.
I have now, thanks. Thanks, Councillor, through you, Mayor. The amended development plan proposes an increase in the number of possible allotments from 426 to 511, 74, 85 additional lots across the estate.
Okay, thank you, if I may, Mayor. So we've also heard concerns raised tonight and obviously in written objections prior around that change in density for one particular section of the new development. What measures have the planning department considered to try and ameliorate those concerns?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. So there has been a number of meetings and discussions with the 2 adjoining neighbours and with the applicant to see if we could reach a resolution. The recommendation that's before you includes some of those. So as was mentioned, I think by Mr Websdale, there's a condition or an amendment required to the plan for a 4 metre restriction at the rear of the new lots. So basically you can't put a shed in the backyard that's closer than 4 metres to the boundary. And also there is a requirement in the original recommendation for fencing. So normally we wouldn't require a developer to provide fencing. It's up to the Fences Act and negotiation between adjoining owners as to who pays for fencing. That requirement, in conjunction with the 4 metre rear boundary setback, was intended to provide a degree of visual screening for any dwellings that appeared on the new lots. Bearing in mind that there is a significant gradient here, so this is not flat land, so the land in Goose Gully Court Drive is elevated, looking down over. And we heard all tonight there's a row of vegetation at the rear of the property. So the combination of the 4 metre exclusion zone or setback from the rear boundary and the fencing was regarded by officers as being a reasonable way to address what we felt was the primary concern of the objectors, which is that direct amenity impact of having those houses built on smaller lots. They were the proposals that were included. There was also a number of the negotiations around drainage, and one of the other things that we proposed was that drainage arrangements were put in place by a developer to deal with flows from other land, which normally wouldn't be a requirement. In the end, they agreed that they would be prepared to do that. But obviously, it seems that, certainly from Mr Websdale's commentary, that the 4 metre setback and the fencing arrangement, it doesn't satisfy him. That's clear.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Buckley, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. My question is in regards to the traffic issue that was raised before by Mr Eastman about the concerns that it was perhaps out of date, and also has there been provisions made in this development where public transport would gain easy access to be able to perhaps relieve some of the burden of traffic movements?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. So I did have a chance to have a quick look at the traffic report while the gentleman was speaking. He is correct, actually. The report does refer to a retirement village on the site, which has now been changed to a residential village. But as I recall answering the question several months ago, we talked about the traffic generation there, and it's almost exactly the same. So the traffic generation at 8 to 10 vehicles a day from a standard residential subdivision worked out to 900 vehicles a day. The traffic generation calculated at 6 vehicles per day for 150 dwellings on the residential village is exactly the same number. So accepted that the traffic report does have an error in it, but the error is not consequential in terms of the overall calculation. The traffic report also does identify primarily the issue around traffic demand and road capacity is around the number of vehicles per day that are generated by the development. The traffic report does conclude, and I have had a quick look through it again, it does conclude that on the predictions of traffic movement from Brookfield Lakes, the local road network is capable of carrying the traffic, which accounts for 300 vehicles per day in the peak hour. That's in the peak hour. And 300 vehicles per day is not a large amount on a road system that has been designed, per hour is not a large number for that road system. So that's the traffic. We are satisfied that the road network is capable of taking the traffic generated by this proposal. The public transport question, again, Councillor Buckley, with pleasure I will provide an answer similar to what I have previously. The council does not plan for or provide public transport. What we do is we ensure that road design is capable of taking buses and accommodating bus stops. It's up to the state government to provide public transport for these areas, and as we have previously indicated, it will be appropriate, and I'm sure it will happen, that council will advocate to the state government for better bus services to be provided to these emerging residential areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I see none. So I would ask councillors, there is a recommendation in this report, so I'll now call on any Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move a motion.
I see. Can you
I think that,
announce your motion?
Yeah, thank you, Janelle. So do you want me to read that motion, or do people want to read it up there?
I think you should read it.
All right.
Give us a
Thank
verbal
you, Mayor.
account. Thank you.
The motion is that the council, 1, receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report. 2, approves the endorsement of the amended development plan of 135 Great Alpine Road, Lucknow, Lot H on PS 846223, as amended September 24, and detailed at attachment 1, with changes as listed below, and subject to the inclusion of an amended planning permit conditions to the existing planning permit as applies to the subject land, in brackets 54.2009.4. A, amend the development plan to retain the 4 low-density lots, 1,000 square metres or greater, along the western boundary of stage 11. B, delete the requirement for fencing and notice of restriction on the western boundary of all allotments in stage 11. And C, any consequential changes to the road layout. 3, notes that the planning permit 547.2009.4 will be amended to include the following requirements. A landscape plan which details the planning regime in the reserve adjoining Doyles Road. B, an amended traffic management plan. C, plan of subdivision must also include drainage easements as required. D, detailed construction and drainage plans for stage 11, which addresses current preconditions and overland flow from existing properties to the west to ensure that all overland flow, currently uncontrolled, into the subject land is appropriately provisioned with the necessary infrastructure to discharge into the waterway. E, a section 173 legal agreement which will be registered on the title for all allotments in stages 7 and 11, which prevents vehicle access to Doyles Road. And F, preparation of a fencing plan or inclusion within an improved construction management plan showing a consistent form of timber paling fence of 1.8 metres in height for stages 8 and 9. And 4, delegates authority to the General Manager, Place and Community to endorse changes to the development plan generally in accordance with the above requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Do we have a seconder? Go with Councillor Davis. Would you like to speak to this amendment, Councillor Davis?
No, Mayor.
Okay, that would lead me to ask the question, does anyone oppose? What have I done? Come on. Come. Well, here we go again. This is going to be a long night. Would you like to speak to it, to your amended motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think one of the major issues with these amendments to already existing plans is that no one gets the right to object. And I don't believe that is fair and proper. I believe that the speakers that we've had tonight have pointed out that they have gone into their purchase knowing what they were buying, and then suddenly the whole thing is amended and changed and they have no right of appeal. So therefore, I think that this motion that retains those 2 blocks is a fair and reasonable compromise on the amended plan that was submitted, and I think it provides a way for everyone to be satisfied with the outcome. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor Allen. Now I ask, does anybody else, does anyone object to this? I see nobody, so sorry.
Sorry, Mayor, I don't object. I'd just like to seek some clarification, if that's okay, on a particular point there.
From the officers?
From whoever is willing to offer an answer. So it relates, if that's okay?
Oh, I think so. Yes, we can.
So it relates
do
to section 3E there, and the imposition of section 173 legal agreements, which we registered on the title for all allotments in stages 7 and 11, which would prevent vehicle access to Doyle's Road. Am I to understand that those allotments wouldn't necessarily require access to Doyle's Road, and that provision is being proposed as a way to limit the amount of extra traffic that Doyle's Road would receive?
Correct. So the intent all the way along, Councillor, has been for us to prevent access to Doyle's Road. When this proposal came in, the first thing we said was you can't have each of these lots with a direct access to Doyle's Road. Each of the lots is serviced by the internal road network, so this condition is required simply to prevent them from, dare I suggest, putting gates in their back fences and dragging boats and trailers in there.
That's where I was going. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I'm happy that's cleared that up.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. So, anyone else wish to speak for? I see no one. So, are we okay to move forward and go to the vote? Is that? Oh, yes. I'm getting the nod. All right. So, all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous, but 8, because we have Councillor Eastman out of the room, who has declared a conflict of interest. So I may ask now that Councillor Eastman be invited back into the chamber. And then for our next item, I think that this is the one that Ms Johnson has a conflict, so we're playing musical chairs here. There's one going out and one coming back. Thank you, Councillor Eastman. Now, the next report is item 5.1.3. And it's an application to end a section 173 agreement, AF 545507J 160 Orrs Road, Wyong. Now, before we get our officer's report, I would invite Carl and Kay Gasper to come forward and make their submission. Thank you.
Lucky last. Good evening.
So,
Mayor and
welcome.
councillors.
The same as other speakers. It's 5 minutes to say your piece, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Discussions. This is in regards to 160 Orrs Road, Re 173 removal. Discussions with Michelle Dixon advised that an application to subdivide could be made. Development Solutions advised that the agreement on the title would need to be varied or ended as it restricted further subdivision. Development Solutions recommended seeking advice from council planners to determine if ending the agreement would be supported. Advice from Andrew Bates on the 29th of June 23 suggested the proposal could be supported, acknowledging that the proposal would require notice, which may alter the outcome. Robert Pringle provided written confirmation on March 21st, 2024. Notwithstanding this potential for impact, the responsibility authority has determined to give in principle support under section 178A(3) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 to the ending of the agreement. A review of the rural living zone would establish that there are only 2 lots in the entire estate that are greater than 4 hectares. This means only 2 additional lots could be created within the subdivision. Considering there are only 2 lots in the subdivision that could be further subdivided, these should be considered individually and will not have an overall effect on the estate. Our proposal to subdivide will result in 1 additional lot that still meets the zone minimum of 2 hectares. The recommendation is contrary to preliminary advice provided. Appropriate consultation with the neighbours has occurred. The time taken for the housing and settlement strategy and the review of the rural living zones is unknown and has been very long. It is unreasonable to expect us to wait when the outcome is considered likely to be that only 2 properties can create an additional 2 lots. Given our current circumstances, in addition to logic, there is no reason this should not be permitted now. The neighbouring properties would have another chance to comment on any further application for subdivision. We would be happy to include a building envelope to protect neighbouring properties. The objections received do not provide solid reasons to refuse our request. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. And Carl, you wish to speak too?
Yes, I do, yes. Since our application, our lives have drastically changed. Last year I lost my vision, declared legally blind, which has been quite traumatic. I was running a business, which unfortunately I can't, and that helped to pay our mortgage. Now, on compassionate and hardship grounds, should we be able to sell that block of land, we could pay our mortgage and we could still be living in our home, which would certainly help my mental health. Also, I'm a bit confused at the neighbours, because when we spoke to them, they mentioned an envelope, and in principle they would not object to that, because where the block is has no effect on their property whatsoever. And if anyone knows the land, they'll know what I'm talking about. So we would like consideration for that 173 to be removed. Yeah, so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Councillors, do you have any questions of Kay or Carl? Councillor Farquhar.
Okay.
Yes.
So the block of land you're subdividing, you'll still have your house on there?
Yes.
And then you're selling another block?
We have a little over 10 acres.
Yep.
And the block would be around the minimum, which is 4, which is 2 hectares.
Yep.
So that's the smallest you can subdivide. So that means we would still be in the sizing zone that they're asking. It has 2 road frontages. Everything is there. And if there was a building envelope, it would not affect any views from the neighbouring house that are objecting to this. Probably 5 years ago, they approached us if we wanted to sell the block, because friends of theirs were interested in buying the block. And when we got back to them after consideration and talking about it then, the price was too high for them, so they declined. So then, because of our circumstances, we decided to approach them, a neighbour, and ask would they object to if we would sell the block of land. So that objection was met by, no, I can't see any reason, but we'd need to know where the building envelope would be. So because we had inquiries, we took this road to see if we could sell the property. And if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't have approached the council or anything to do this. So we were led that it would be okay with them. So then we received a letter to say that they objected. We even offered them, if they would like to purchase the land, if they did want a house there, they could purchase the land, and we would give them quite a substantial discount on the land. So after they thought about it, we even sent them 3 quotes to what the land was valued at. They asked how much would it be worth. So we did that. Then we didn't hear anything else. We just got a letter to say that they weren't going to approve it, and there were not interested in purchasing the land. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. We just got to probably stress that the conversation there was actually not really about a planning matter. It was more about your circumstances. But that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I've allowed that. So, okay. Councillor Davis, you've got a question also.
Thanks, Kay. You've spoken about envelope. Where would the proposed envelope be in relation to the block?
Well, I don't know if that's my suggestion to do that, or is that council's suggestion, whoever buys the block? I don't... Or the neighbours. The neighbours, we were talking back further up towards our land, so that they would only have a view, because the neighbour's view is out that way. It's not. If they built a house there, from inside their house, they wouldn't see it. They would only see it if they drove up the road or drove in their driveway. Okay. So, yeah.
Thank you, Kay.
Yeah.
Councillor Crook.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for your submission. Were you aware of the Section 173 preventing further subdivision when you purchased the land?
Didn't know anything about it, no.
Didn't appear in your Section 32 in the title documents?
May have, but I didn't read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we're unaware. Yeah. Totally.
Okay. Thank you.
So, there are no further questions. Sorry, Councillor Eastman, have you got a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Can I ask how long you've been there?
We've been there over 8 years.
And this is the first time there's been an attempt at subdividing the land?
As far as I know, yes. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, just one last question.
Mm-hmm.
When you bought the land, did you think it would be able to be subdivided?
We didn't consider it. It's only because of events that have happened, and a bit before that, that we thought if we could sell the land. I've always thought, well, it's my land, can't I do what I want? But no, we could sell the land and then it would set us up independently, and Carl's not very comfortable in new surrounds these days. So, yeah, so it would help us out for our future.
Okay.
Thank
all
you.
right. So, that's the last of the questions. So, we can move a recommendation.
Can I...
Gee whiz. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Stevenson. This has become a very complicated meeting tonight, but we'll get there. I have my minders. Keep me on the straight and narrow.
So thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the submission. Councillors, before you is the report titled Application to End 173 Agreement for 160 Orrs Road, Wyong. An application to end an agreement in relation to one of the 21 lots subject to the agreement has been made by an agent of the landowner in accordance with the Planning and Environment Act 1987 process. The agreement was required at the time the land was subdivided, as the maximum number of lots that could be created under the zone controls was achieved. Some lots were allowed to be created that were smaller than the minimum size of 2 hectares. 2 larger lots of greater than 4 hectares were created, and if not for the 173 agreement, may have already been re-subdivided. Ending the agreement would allow for an application to be made to subdivide the land into 2 lots of approximately 2 hectares. Aside from the agreement and permit history, this may seem like a reasonable proposal. Notice of the proposal to end the agreement was given, and 2 objections have been received, both from owners subject to the same agreement. The concern is that subdivision would change the amenity of their property, which was purchased with awareness of the agreement. Traffic and other amenity concerns are also cited. The required conditions for ending an agreement include the reasons for the agreement and whether the agreement is still required. It is considered that there has been no change in practice since the agreement was required, and a similar outcome would occur today if the subdivision of 20 years ago was proposed today. The Housing and Settlement Strategy calls for further strategic review of the rural living zone, areas of East Gippsland Shire, with the desire to coordinate infill development and suitable precincts. The subject land is included in the review area and may benefit from the review. In consideration of the proposal and the requirements of the Act in relation to ending an agreement, officers recommend the request to end the agreement should be refused, and a list of reasons including that the agreement remains relevant today is provided in the recommendations. Thank you, Mayor.
Good, thank you. Sorry for that mistake. So now, councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Section 173 agreement to prevent further subdivision was put in place by the council when the land was originally subdivided. I'm just trying to get this clear in my head. So that agreement was put in place and agreed to by the original, subdivision applicant, who then went forward with the understanding that no further subdivision would occur and subdivided the land. Those blocks were then subsequently sold to various other people, including people represented here tonight. But the agreement to have no further subdivision still stands, and the officer's recommendation is to support that original agreement. Have I got that right?
I'd like to say yes is the short answer. Just to possibly embellish a tiny bit, the agreement was put in place by council due to a requirement in the planning scheme for a lot entitlement. So there were 43 hectares originally. At 2 hectares per lot, that means 21 lots. The scheme says that you can have lots smaller than 2 hectares as long as you don't exceed 21 lots in essence. So that was why the Section 173 agreement was put in place, was to reinforce that requirement of the scheme, which gave council the ability to approve lots greater than 2 hectares. So in effect, the 2 lots within the subdivision that are greater than 4 hectares are there because there are other lots in the subdivision that were less than 2, and that fulfilled the entitlement. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Eastman.
So just a query on that one, and you've probably explained it before, but does that mean under this, with the zoning, it's supposed to be a 2 hectare minimum? Is that correct?
What the planning scheme says, councillor, is that in the rural living zone, Schedule 1, it's a 2 hectare minimum. But then it says that you can subdivide lots less than 2 hectares as long as the average density of a 2 hectare lot subdivision is achieved. So as long as the total number of lots averages out to 2 hectares per lot, you can have lots less than 2. Yep. I'm assuming that the subdivision occurred with the 4 hectares and the 2 and the 3s because the subdivider wanted to give a range of sizes to people rather than all 2 hectares, but I'm not sure. But basically it's an averaging provision which says you're entitled to 21 lots. You can have some lots less than 2, but you've got to have some less than 4 to make up, more than 4 to make up for that.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you. So if there are no more questions, I might get it right this time. There is a recommendation in the report, so I'll now call on any councillor to move the motion. Councillor Farquhar.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move an alternate motion. I'd like to that the council receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report. Being a reasonable authority and having considered the relevant matters of the 173B2 of the Planning Environment Act 1987 and the submissions received in accordance with the 173D pursuant to 173E3-A, now decides to end that agreement on AF 545507J as it relates to 160 Orrs Road, Wyong, in accordance with the proposal. Council directs officers to carry out notice of the decision in accordance with the 173F and notes that if the final determination is that the agreement is ended, that all costs incurred by ending of the agreement of AF 545507J must be paid by the owners of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Do we have anyone who... we need a seconder first. Okay, so a seconder. Councillor Travascus. Okay, so we need you to speak to this, to your alternate motion, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I think given the circumstances that there are other blocks of this size already in the area, I believe that, and the other exceptional circumstances that relates to the proponent, I think, yeah, I would like to see this go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Travascus. You're okay? Nothing?
No question.
All right, thank you. Do we have any councillors who oppose this amendment? You do? Yes? Councillor Cook.
I would like to speak against the motion. This is not an amendment. Councillor Farquhar's moved the motion. If you're asking for speakers for and against, I'm happy to speak against the motion that's been moved. Is now the time to do that?
Yes.
So I'll start by saying that obviously the personal circumstances of the people seeking this change are, you know, really regrettable, and I do certainly feel for them. And I understand why they would seek to subdivide their land, why you would seek to subdivide your land. It's entirely understandable. It's really not, however, consistent with the way that our council needs to approach planning matters. We're asking basically for an exemption in this one case to what would be considered orderly planning. If our council is seeking to change the density in this, I understand it's a Zone 1 rural living, this is zoning, the proper way to do that would be to consult with the broader community who live in that particular area around the preferred densities of, you know, now and into the future. And if it was found that there was an appetite to do that, and good reason to, then that change in the planning rules would apply equally to everybody. It's certainly not good planning practice, albeit this a very difficult decision under your circumstances, and I do understand that. It's not good practice for us to be making ad hoc decisions on a once-off basis. It doesn't necessarily set a precedent in planning, because every application needs to be judged on its merits, but it would suggest to various other landowners in the surrounding area and to anybody else in this zone, in fact, that applying to have the 173 agreement removed, which is there for good reason to prevent, you know, undue development and intensification of development in a certain zone, would be, you know, open to them as well. And they could rightfully ask why council had sought to allow this one application special treatment. And while there may be grounds for special treatment, I understand that. Unfortunately, that's not the way planning needs to work. So I'm speaking against this amendment because I don't believe that it represents the intent of the Planning Environment Act. And I think it's very important that our council pays attention to the way the Act is structured to provide procedural fairness to everybody. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. So do we have anyone else that wishes to speak for or against? Councillor Allen?
Yeah, I'll speak for the motion. Look, I think we can stand on the letter of the law on any issue, but sometimes we need to sit back and look at the circumstances and say, well, hang on, this is a bit different. And that's what this case is. And I think that the circumstances are just so compelling. You know, you put yourself in Carl's position, you don't want to be going into a new environment. You know where you are, you know where you live, and if this enables them to be able to continue to live on that, in that property, in that house, I think we've got to have a bit of compassion as well as stand on the letter of the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Buckley, you've also got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. Well, I'd like to address Councillor Crook's concerns, and I think that if we look at our historical voting with 173 agreements, we've removed plenty of them in the past, and for good reasons and for varied reasons. And I think that I will vote for this amendment, perhaps with a little bit of reservation around the fact that it hasn't included I think it was referred to as a building parcel, so that it protects the amenity. Is that correct? What's the correct terminology, Mayor? If I could just seek some clarification.
Well,
Envelope.
yes,
that's the
it's
word.
a building envelope.
Building envelope. So I would suggest perhaps that the mover of the motion may consider a further amendment to the motion to ensure that that is included. That's just a suggestion, and I'm quite happy to support the motion.
Sorry, is Councillor Buckley moving an amendment?
We can't do that, Councillor Buckley, because if there is no subdivision, there is no provision for putting a building envelope. That would have to come.
Just to clarify, councillors, if this motion goes through and the amendment is ended, then a subdivision application will be required, and that's the appropriate time for a building envelope to be considered.
Thank you for that clarification. So as long as that process happens, then I'm happy to support the motion.
Good, thank you. Okay, Councillor Farquhar, you do have a right of reply to the one councillor who has will not support this.
Thanks, Councillor Crook, for that comment. I think we've already identified that there are 2 hectare blocks in that area. Is that correct, Martin?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. So I think as far as planning concerns, if we carve off another 2 hectare block off a 10 hectare site, it's already established that there are other blocks out there of that size. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Ooh, we'd sort of gone past more questions. I did. So, okay, Councillor Eastman, I will allow it, but I did ask if there were any more for or against, and nobody put their hand up.
Doesn't matter.
But no, you're quite welcome to. It's okay then. Well, councillors, we could put this to the vote. So I would ask all those in favour to raise your hand. And there's Councillor Buckley there too. And those against? Thank you, councillors. The motion is passed with 7 voting for and 2 voting against. Thank you, officers. So we've
take a brief intermission.
Perhaps if we just have a very slight adjournment, because we have some very upset people in the chamber, possibly more than just 2.
Thanks, Mayor.
May I ask our electronics people, are we offline? Thank you to those who may be online and watching. I felt it was necessary to just adjourn the meeting for a moment while our guests left the chamber. So that moves us to another report, which is 5.1.4, which is Agricultural Sector Advisory Committee confirmed meeting held, the minutes of that meeting held on 8th of August 2024. So it's going back a little way, but we'll get there in the end. So, Mr Stevenson, would you please present your report?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll be really quick because the report provides the minutes for the Agricultural Sector Advisory Committee, ASAC meeting held Thursday the 8th of August 2024 at the Council Chambers, and they are basically provided to councillors for noting.
Thank you. So, councillors, do you have any questions or of clarification on the minutes? Good, I see none. So therefore, do we have, there is a recommendation in the report, so I'll now call on any councillor to move the motion, please. Councillor Allen. So do we have a seconder? Councillor Buckley, thank you. So, Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to this?
No, it's procedural, so thank you.
Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, just briefly. You know, the Agricultural Committee does a great bulk of work, and our region is dependent on the advice that they give. I think we've had some pretty positive results, and I look forward to hearing more about what's happening in that sector into the future, and certainly just acknowledging the very dry times that are happening in the far east of our region. And my thoughts go out to those agricultural farmers who are suffering in drought conditions, and I hope that the government will be giving some support and relief to them soon. Thank you, Mayor.
Good, thank you, Councillor Buckley. I certainly appreciate your concerns. So, would anyone else like to, or is the motion opposed? Anyone else wish to speak to it? See nobody. All right, well, could I please put this motion to the vote? All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous, officers. Now, this one is a change of officer or manager. It's our business excellence, and this is 5.2.1, which is a Microsoft agreement renewal 2025. So, our manager of business excellence, Ms Johnson, would you please present your report?
Thank you, Mayor. Before you tonight is a report about the renewal of Council's Microsoft Enterprise Agreement for a 3-year period, being the 2025 to 2028 period. Key points for consideration is that all Victorian councils with Microsoft software products are required by law to adhere to and maintain up-to-date licensing of their products. Microsoft is the preferred platform for government. It is used by federal, state and local governments because it meets all government compliance and security controls and all cyber security requirements. As you can imagine, our business administration operations, everything we do, is underpinned by Microsoft technologies and software products. The current agreement is set to expire on the 31st of March, and procurement of the new Microsoft agreement was undertaken by the Municipal Association of Victoria on behalf of all councils in Victoria. The other part to this report is that in 2024, East Gippsland and Wellington Shire Council, and as you would all appreciate, we have a shared service agreement with them, were successful in receiving joint grant funding to facilitate Microsoft CoPilot training and a trial of up to 25 staff. This is part of how we continue with digital transformation and utilise AI opportunities as we can. The CoPilot trial rollout is starting very small, and it will only be used where there's key productivity gains or efficiencies can be achieved. As part of this report, though, we're seeking approval for the additional budget for up to 300 users, again incrementally over that 3-year period, that will be that may use CoPilot if the cost-benefit stacks up as part of that, and for the efficiency piece, obviously, to ring true. Also present tonight, we've got Phil Philippou, who's our Chief Information Officer, who's available to respond to questions as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Ms Johnson, and I was also about to introduce Phil. I would suggest that if councillors have questions of a technical nature, he's just the man to answer them. So, councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Buckley.
Yes, good evening, Phil. Nice to see you here. Look, I'm quite excited about CoPilot, and I'd just like a little bit of a brief explanation about how that's going to assist the organisation in our efficiency and the benefits that our community might see in regards to the implementation of it.
Through you, Mayor, I'll get Phil to jump in on that one. He's got a very good briefing on it.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Buckley. Over the next 3-year period, we will be looking where we can use AI to enable us to achieve better outcomes for community. And we're looking to use CoPilot for back office efficiencies, and we're also looking to apply CoPilot across all of the other services that are front-facing, so we can get a better customer experience for our community. CoPilot will allow us to obviously try and achieve a faster and more accessible customer service. It will allow us to investigate smarter infrastructure and asset management over the next 3-year period. It can be applied to efficient waste tracking, can be applied to public safety, for financial management. It also can be applied to achieve cost efficiencies and financial sustainability. So we can use AI to make more informed decisions using data, and obviously allowing us to use AI for fraud detection and compliance monitoring across the business. So there are many opportunities, but it will be on a use case, and each case will be supported by a business case, and if it can offer value to the community, then it would be looked at favourably.
Thank you. And just one supplementary question, if I may, Mayor. That would also be inclusive of ensuring and protecting people's, civil liberties and privacy, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Buckley. We are governed. We have to meet the legislative obligations of the Victorian Protective Data Security Standards and OVIC's Data and Privacy Protection Act, and also we have to operate in accordance with freedom of information. But we have all of the frameworks there to protect personal information and also counsel business.
Thank you so much, Philip.
Thank you.
Councillor Eastman, you have a question also.
Good evening, Phil. Thanks, Mayor. I'm just wondering if you've done any work or research into the possible impacts on employment numbers if CoPilot's introduced, Phil?
Through you, Mayor, I might take that question, Phil, if that's okay. No, not at this stage, Councillor Eastman. Again, it would be a case-by-case approval for the CoPilot licence to be used. And so whilst we anticipate that we'll get up to 300 over that period of time, we are starting small to be able to harness what benefits that we're getting. And again, we'll be applying to some areas over others. So it's very difficult to answer that as directly based on the stage of the trial that we're up to with CoPilot being just the 25 licences being released across the business.
I'm not sure whether I understood the response, Sarah.
So again, through you, Mayor, we have not got to a stage where we would be quantifying any potential staff reductions the use of CoPilot. At the moment, again, we're just at a trial basis of the 25 people, and we're hoping that through the approval of the procurement of more licences, we'll be able to realise those benefits of CoPilot and harness the efficiencies in it. But we haven't quantified what that would look like in terms of our operational spends and other efficiencies.
So that hasn't been quantified elsewhere? Have we seen any research into the impacts of CoPilot on employment numbers?
I haven't, through you again, Mayor, I haven't seen any directly. Phil may have seen some, but I feel like the industry is just starting out on this journey.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Crook.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, look, it sure is easy to get excited about AI. I know I use it in a range of different applications and it can just be absolutely fantastic. I guess it is sort of, we are in our infancy in the council here in adopting this CoPilot product. Sort of sounds exciting, but you know, I think we need to be mindful that it is early days and that there are downsides to AI potentially as well around employment. So one thing I think we can quantify in these early days is the cost to council. I know, Ms Johnson, you did quickly mention a figure there, and I'm struggling to recall exactly what that figure was for the adoption of this CoPilot. We'll call it a trial. Will I be right in saying it's a trial at this stage? What's that costing council?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, Councillor Cook, and again through you, Mayor. So the licence cost, and I do believe I cited them incorrectly, and then I should have checked with Phil before I said them. So it's $55 per licence per month. And again, if you budget that over 300 people across the 3 years, that would be the figure that we're being quoted as part of the take-up of.
Do you have that figure at hand, or do I need to work that out?
So the total figure for 3 years would be $594,000. And again, we would be, and we already have identified offsets to licence fees to be able to build that into the budget, and obviously assuming that we're going to have further efficiencies and operational savings as part of being able to do business better.
Well, we haven't actually identified what those efficiencies are yet, but we're planning on spending $500,000 to get some licences. Am I right in, through you, Mayor, if that's...
Excuse me, because it's confidential, part of this document is confidential, just be really careful.
Sorry, is the
you
cost...
are not crossing the line, yes.
Okay, sorry, I
thought
that information was disclosed by the
pursue.
officer, that's why my question pertained to the cost. No?
Okay, I think we have an answer to that. Just as I remind you, because if
thank you,
you
Mayor,
need to ask questions like that, we would then have to go into...
Sure, and happy to take your guidance on that, if I could pursue a different line of question.
Yes,
your permission.
go ahead. Yes.
So, Microsoft are obviously a huge market player in this space. Do we evaluate any different software providers? I just know I've heard a fair bit of sentiment in the community around not wanting to support big American tech firms at the moment. And I'm wondering if any alternatives were explored, or whether this is just more money to Bill Elon and his tech bros.
Thank you, Councillor Cook, and through you, Mayor. I'll start this one off and then I'll throw to Phil. You're quite right. They do have a very strong presence in the market, and as I understand it, they are the only product that we can provide to meet our cybersecurity and other security compliance requirements. Phil, can I get you to extend on that a little bit, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. There are many different AI solutions. The more dominant ones are probably the open source generative AI solutions, Councillor Cook, that you might see that are freely available on the internet. We have to operate and meet our legislative and cyber risk obligations, and so we're limited in what we can use. There are AI tools in planning, AI tools in finance. This particular AI solution is for integration into our core Microsoft products, which will be used for obviously automating routine administrative tasks and reporting and analytics. But there are other tools that would be looked at on a business case basis. So it's not a free-for-all. This is particularly to achieve efficiencies through our Microsoft product platform, which is core infrastructure to council and core systems that are attached to council.
Thanks, Phil.
So, if there are no more questions, would somebody like to move? Thank you, Councillor Crook. A seconder, please. Councillor Farquhar. So would you like to now speak to this item in terms of what's on the screen to fill in the blanks, please?
Yep, I'm just making sure I've got the right bit of paper, which I don't think I do. Oh, yes, I do. So if I could ask that the blanks be filled in there. So the motion would read, 1, that Council adopt the recommendations contained in confidential attachment 1, Municipal Association of Victoria Tender Evaluation Panel Contract NPN 2.17-3. Number 2, approves the renewal of the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement for the period of 3 years for the quoted total value, and I am allowed to quote the value, just confirming.
Yes, you are now.
Yes, of
Yes.
$1.834531.96 million, excluding GST, submitted by Crayon Australia Proprietary Limited, former Vic Australia Proprietary Limited, or WIC. Number 3, approves for procurement of Microsoft CoPilot licences as needed over the next 3-year period to the total value of $594,000, excluding GST. Number 4, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to execute such documents as are necessary to give effect to these arrangements. And 5, resolves that the confidential agreements to this report and all discussions related to the attachments remain confidential.
Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. Oh, yes. Could you please confirm that that is correct?
I'll confirm that it is correct.
Good, thank you. So now we've got past those details. Would you like to speak to this, Councillor?
Certainly.
Cook?
Look, just briefly, as we've heard tonight, councillors and for anyone else listening, these are the products provided by Microsoft for Information Technology Suite, including those new AI products we spoke of. They are critical to Council's core business. We simply cannot operate within this environment without them, and they are in fact the only products that meet the various statutes and specifications for which we must comply. So Microsoft have, use a colloquialism, have us over a barrel on this one. We've got to use the products. We have fortunately sought to procure the services of these Microsoft products through a cooperative licensing agreement through the Municipal Association of Victoria, who have been able to grow group tender for the provision of these products, which has substantially reduced the cost to our and various other councils participating in that process. So I have no hesitation in recommending the officer's recommendation to the council group for approval. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Farquhar.
Thanks. I totally agree with Councillor Crook on that, and I'd like to congratulate Phil for guiding us through this new technology. It's absolutely essential, and we've got to be the best at it. So, thanks, Phil.
So, do we have anyone else who maybe would like to speak against this motion, or again speak for it? I see none. So. Oh, my apologies, Councillor Buckley. They made you so small on the screen because of the document. I didn't see that.
That's okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Look, it's eye-watering, the amount of money that we've got in front of us, but I concur with Councillor Crook. But what I also would like to ensure the public is that we will be looking very closely at how CoPilot does provide efficiencies and a cost benefit for the money that is being put into that area, which will help our officers, help our organisation, and in turn also give better customer service, which is what we're really aiming for. So I'm happy to support this motion. And thanks for all the work that you're doing, Phil, and your team.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley, and my sentiments also exactly. So, councillors, if there is no more people wishing to speak, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's unanimous. Also, officers. Now, just to quickly break, I've got it. I've got it.
Extension of time?
Yes, I have got it. Yeah, I'm right onto it. They put it in front of me 2 hours ago.
Did they?
So this is for an extension of the meeting. So, councillors, we still have several matters to consider in tonight's meeting. Therefore, I seek a motion that council resolves to extend the meeting by 1 hour. So I have a mover, Councillor Allen.
Yes.
Do I have a Councillor Davis? So would you like to speak to the motion? Good answer.
So I agree with Councillor Allen.
All right. So thank you, councillor. So is the motion opposed? All right, so I would like to put that to the vote. So all those in favour? So that's unanimous. So therefore, I can see with the number of items we still have, we will certainly be going well after 9 o'clock. So in asking for a 1 hour extension, it's giving us, it's comfortably giving us time to complete the meeting. Sorry about that, everybody, including those who may be watching online and going, well, when are they going to finish? So we've gone through that one. This is 5.2.2, which is our council meeting resolution register. It's another one for Ms Johnson. So would you please present your report?
Thank you, Mayor. Reporting council resolutions is a vital measure of council's performance and provides information you need to demonstrate transparency and accountability to the community. Council's Chief Executive Officer is responsible for ensuring that decisions of Council are implemented without undue delay. So for the period of 1 October to 31 December, there were 15 open Council resolutions, not including resolutions for noting only, of which 14 have been completed and 1 is in progress, and 2 closed Council resolutions, again, not including resolutions for noting only, of which 1 is complete and 1 is in progress. You'll also notice in the report that there's an update on any outstanding actions from the previous report tabled on the 30th of September 2024, and those updates are provided at attachments 2 and 4. The report is now presented to you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. So, councillors, are there any questions regarding this item? Okay, no. Looks like it's you're flying through now. That's good. So would somebody like to move the motion? Councillor Allen, do we have a seconder? I'll go with Councillor Eastman. So thank you, councillors. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this is part of our transparency and accountability, and it shows that we've been busy. So I think that's all that needs to be said.
Thank you. Thank you for those words. Councillor Eastman.
I'm grateful for the presentation of the information. It's really helpful as a new councillor to be able to keep track of what's happening, and I'm sure it's a good thing for the community to keep tabs on things so they don't have to keep on trying to find information in myriad pages otherwise. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone who wishes to speak against this? Fine. Anyone else who may wish to speak for the motion? We have one councillor who has left for a short break, but I think we should be able to proceed. Okay, so thank you, councillors. So all those in favour? That is unanimous with it's 8, but with one councillor who has just stepped out for a moment. Right, 5.2.3, the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly 2025 Notices of Motion. Ms Johnson, again, would you please present your report?
Thank you, Mayor. Key points for consideration is that every year the National General Assembly is conducted in Canberra of the Australian Local Government Association. This year the conference will be held on the 24th to the 27th of June. As part of that process and aligned with the theme for the National General Assembly for this year, councils are invited to submit motions as part of their advocacy program. The theme for 2025 is National Priorities Need Local Solutions. So in line with the advocacy approach of councillors, we have proposed motions which are at attachments 1, 2, 3 and 4. Motion 1 being restoration of the local roads and community infrastructure program. Motion 2 being funding programs to allow for infrastructure to meet the challenges of a changing climate through the Disaster Ready Fund. Motion 3 being expanding access to the roads of strategic importance program to deliver vital road safety and industry transport links. And motion 4 being implementation of all recommendation in the Australian Government's Regional Telecommunications Independent Review Committee report. If approved, the motions will be submitted, after which they will be considered at ALGA for inclusion in the agenda in the National Conference. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So, councillors, do you have any questions regarding these motions or these items that are going to Elgar? No? Okay. Well, would somebody like to move the motion? Councillor Crook, seconded Councillor Buckley. So, Councillor Crook, could you speak?
Yes, certainly, Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity. These motions to the Australian Council of Local Government need to be endorsed officially by a council meeting such as this, so it's an important requirement. They obviously speak to some of the core needs of our community and our council and form, as it stands, part of our advocacy platform more broadly. When presented at the Australian Council of Local Governments conference in Canberra, these motions will be an opportunity for other councils around the country, around 550 of them, thereabouts, to also back in these needs, because many of them are in fact shared by other communities around the country, and there is a clear need for government at all levels to support these needs. So I have no hesitation in recommending the report.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak?
Oh, yes, look, I certainly support everything that Councillor Crook has said, and perhaps with one further comment, and that is that the national priorities in regards to road safety and strategic transport links, you know, are an imperative for our region. And it would be remiss of me and ensuring that I'm representing my community to once again mention that the Corryong Road is a strategic road that would help with the agriculture from our region, and that it should be highlighted when we do indeed put these motions forward. So thank you very much for the opportunity to support this motion.
Who would have seen that coming? So, do we have anyone who wishes to speak against our Elgar motions? No? Anyone else wish to speak for? I see none, so we will go to the vote with this also. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous. Oh, 5.2.4. The Municipal Association of Victoria, the May 2025 State Council meeting motions. So we're sending motions everywhere. So Ms Johnson, could you please present your report?
Thank you, Mayor. So continuing in the same vein of advocacy for this particular one, these are the motions that we propose to put forward to the Municipal Association of Victoria State Council meeting to be held on the 16th of May. So the Municipal Association, as differentiated from the National Association, represents the 79 local government councils. The MAV rules require them to be of strategic relevance and to align with the 10 priorities set out in the MAV strategy. Council has identified 3 issues for consideration for the submission as potential motions to the State Council that are consistent with the strategy as just outlined. The draft motions are to implement all recommendations from the Financial Sustainability Inquiry into Local Government Funding provided at Attachment 1, resourcing to support health outcomes provided at Attachment 2, and managing the natural estate provided at Attachment 3. Again, these must be adopted by Council. These are proposed to be adopted retrospectively because we have already submitted these to MAV. However, if Council decides that they don't want to submit them tonight to MAV, we can wind that back. The report is now put to you for consideration. Mayor.
Interesting, thank you. So, councillors, questions of our MAV asks? So, Councillor Eastman.
Just a quick one. I'm not au fait with the full report that we're supporting. Can you tell me what the report had to say about rate capping, please?
Thank you, Councillor Eastman. So the inquiry into financial sustainability for local government. I'm recalling back into my mind so what we said on rate capping is that there could be consideration of different rate capping options that could include looking at a local government index as opposed to a CPI-based rate capping. However, the main theme for our advocacy in the financial sustainability inquiry was an increase in the untied funding, so the financial assistance grants, so getting a bigger cut of the bucket, the federal bucket, that then is distributed for us to be able to use to deliver services with cost escalations.
Sorry, just to clarify, so what we're supporting is our recommendations to the inquiry or the inquiry generally? That's why I'm asking.
So we're supporting, well, and so our recommendations were taken up as part of the inquiry, so we would be supporting the full implementation of the recommendations.
Which is, I guess, my question on rate capping comes back. Can you tell me what the recommendations were in relation to rate capping from the inquiry into local government funding and services?
Yes, so my understanding is that rate capping is still supported in the recommendations for the financial sustainability review. I don't know the exact detail of every single recommendation around rate capping, apart from the fact that it was supported.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? I see none. So do we have a mover for this motion? Councillor Buckley, and we have a seconder in Councillor Davis. Councillor Buckley, you have the floor, please.
Yes, look, thank you, Mayor. I think, you know, having been involved with the development of MAV motions and ensuring that they are getting implemented, which is you know, a difficult process, but however incredibly important, and I'll be supporting these motions going forward and also operating as the delegate for East Gippsland. And I think that we've got a lot of work in front of us for our region to ensure that we highlight the importance of these motions. You know, they're there for everyone to read, but certainly the sustainability piece, as well as ensuring that we have good healthcare outcomes for our people. Being further away from healthcare always is it's a very difficult thing for our region. And hang on, have I got that one right? I think I'm a little bit tired. Sorry, folks. But anyway, look, it's something that I'm happy to ensure that I go down and vote the way that the council feels like I should support them and our region. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, you speak to...
No, man, nothing further to add.
Okay, so do we have anyone who wishes to speak against this motion? See nobody. Anyone else would like to speak to it? Well, that seems like we can go straight to the vote also. So all those in favour? Again, officers, that is unanimous. Now, our last report in this open part of the meeting is 5.2.5, Organisational Performance Report, July to December 2024. Again, Ms Johnson, yours to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So quarterly, and as a requirement of the Local Government Act, we present a quarterly finance report is presented to councillors. We've paired this with other key strategic measures, including our council plan as well. So it's a broader organisational performance report. Again, trying to get to how we're being reporting back to community and providing that transparency piece as well as part of reporting on performance. You'll also notice that in this particular report and as required under the Act, the second quarterly finance report needs to include a statement of the Chief Executive Officer as to whether a revised budget is or may be required, and sets out the circumstances where a council must prepare and adopt a revised budget. These are the variation of declared rates, a variation to declared rates and charges, undertaking any further borrowings that have not been approved in the budget, or make a change to the budget that the council considers should be the subject of community engagement. So the CEO, having considered all of those things, has said that this determined that a revised budget will not be required for the 24-25 financial year, which is an important part of this particular report as well. As to going to the rest of the report, the first section of the report provides a summary of achievements against the strategic objectives in the council plan and progress against major initiatives, and the second section of the organisational performance report provides those year-to-date financials. We're still looking at an operating surplus is forecast to be 12.126 million, which is 16 million less than the adopted budget. That's a result of expenditure for grant-funded programs of around $11.2 million that were incomplete at the end of the previous financial year and that will now be completed in 24-25. So it's a mismatch piece. You'll also notice that the forecast that the capital expenditure will be 76.699 million for the year. That's 13.5 million less than adopted budget, with the carry forwards as a result of some of the projects that will now be completed in 25-26. I've also got Liz Collins here tonight if there are any other questions of a technical financial matter. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. So, councillors, any questions or queries regarding this report? It would appear not. So I don't know what to say to you, Liz. You've waited all this time.
I did tell her she could go home earlier, but
yes,
she insisted on staying.
Yes, but thanks for your attendance. So, councillors, if there's no questions, I'll go straight to asking for somebody to move the motion. So, Councillor Farquhar, and I have a seconder in Councillor Travascus. So, Councillor Farquhar, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd just like to congratulate Liz. Extensive reporting and very accurate as far as we can see. So, thank you very much for a great job.
Councillor Travascus?
Thanks for a clear report.
Good, thank you. So, anyone wish to speak against this motion? Or anyone who'd like to also speak for it? Okay, I don't see anybody else, so I think we're making up some time here. So I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour of accepting this report? Thank you, councillors. That is also unanimous. Now we move over to item 6. Thank you, Ms Collins. Good night. So that's item 6, urgent business. Ms Weigel, I believe there is no urgent business for tonight's meeting.
There is none, Mayor.
Thank you. So, item 7, which is confidential business, we do have 2 items listed in the agenda as confidential business. So, councillors, I need a motion that council close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provision of section 66-2 of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following list of items. Item 7.1, Property Matter 1. Item 7.2, Property Matter 2. So I see Councillor Buckley has put her hand up as the mover, and Councillor Travascus has seconded this. So will give us a thumbs up when we're back online. Thank you for anyone who may still be watching and waiting for us. We did use up some of our extended time, but we have gotten through a very large agenda tonight, and we've had some good outcomes. So thank you, officers, for your support and your input. Thank you, councillors, for your attendance tonight. Thank you, CEO. And thank you for those who have now left the gallery, but we did have quite a number of people in the gallery, and thank you to anyone who was watching online. So I think we could sign off, Vanessa, at 9:18 p.m.